Hello, this is Steve Turner, editor of Fastest Streetcar magazine, and I'm here at Summit Motorsports Park as part of the NMRA Ford Homecoming. And over to my right, there's a lot of chaos. This is the Founders Party. They're doing a Christmas tree reaction time contest. There's a lot of prizes. Who knows what's going on? But the important part is that I'm here with Dr. Jamie Meyer, not only the original voice of the NMRA, but also the first editor of Race Pages magazine. And what you may not know is that when I was at 50 Mustang and Superfords magazine, I inherited this freelancer, and I thought, what's a doctor doing writing for a Mustang magazine? So tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Well, I want to thank you for putting me in such an easy environment to work with you, first of all. But there's a lot of energy here around the 25th reunion with NMRA, and it's weird looking back 25 years. I'm just going to be honest. Ever since this event was announced, I was like, man, I can't believe it was 25 years ago, and I think
Yes.
it's hitting a lot of us
Yes.
today. But super cool, and it's great to get some time with you. And I used to do freelance work for you,
Yes.
and it was a lot of fun. And it all came from a real passion for being around these folks and the action in the 50 Mustang Wars pre-NMRA, and then NMRA took it to another level, and then it has really just continued. So it's great to see the community and some of the graduates of this college, if you will,
Right.
the alumni that have come back.
But speaking of college, what I'm really fascinated by is your arc. Because when you were freelancing for me at 50, you actually worked at a college doing scientific research.
Yeah, it was all driven for my love of the car. I love the 50 Mustang. So, yeah, I went to college like everybody. I went to grad school. Not many folks do that. I got my PhD in anatomy and cell biology at Syracuse Medical School. And then I did an 8-year postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Cincinnati Medical School there. So I generally say I was designing cardiovascular drugs, teaching medical school, and studying the pathways to atherosclerosis while I was announcing drag racing and writing for you.
So if you ever wondered, he really is a doctor, and he is really smart, but he's also very, very passionate about this. And we were talking earlier when you were an announcer how engrossed you were and how much you knew about the racers and how much passion you put into announcing. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I loved announcing for these guys, and I was really in a very fortunate situation because you always wanted the latest stories on the new car, the new team, the new record, the event coverage in 50 Mustang magazine. So I was helping you cover the latest in those racing articles, and then I'm announcing almost every weekend somewhere. And the same cars are there, and after a few years, the stories would just come out. And I always put myself in the place of the spectator because I had been a spectator for many years. The star of the show is always the two cars that are on the starting line, and I wanted to make the people watching know as much about those two cars as they possibly could. And it worked very well to promote the car, the driver, the sanctioning body, but also the manufacturers, because I'd remember the supercharger or the turbo and the cylinder
Right.
heads and who built their engine and their crew chief. So I was able to give a lot of that information to the audience while I made up some stories along the way.
Well, I was going to get to that. That's the important part. While Jamie was very, very knowledgeable about the drivers and the cars and knew almost everyone that was at the track that weekend, he would often make up some very elaborate stories, and a lot of people took them very seriously. And I would always be down on the starting line taking photos and just laughing while you were announcing. So talk about some of those. We talked a little earlier about some of those that stuck, some of the fabrications that took on their own life.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind is I would often announce Kid Rock was at the event, that he had flown in. We talked about Big Mike, who was one of the crew members on Chris Tootin's car. I made everybody in the world believe he played for the Carolina Panthers. Johnny Knoxville was often at an NMRA event. You know, now that dates us a little bit, but those were A-list celebrities, and it got people very excited. You know, Mike Murillo had several children, so he was known as the baby maker.
Yes.
And it was just, it was a lot of fun. And they were characters, but they grew into these characters. And the more fun we had with them in the tower, the more they loved it. I always wanted to make sure the families were included, so I would make sure I'd name the wives and make sure we talk about the crew chief, because it takes so much time to come out to NMRA, and it is a sacrifice. It's a lifestyle choice, and I wanted to make sure everybody was having a great time. And, you know, look, Steve, we benefited from some of the biggest knuckleheads in the history of drag racing that came out to NMRA. Steve Wolcott did a great job promoting it, still does. And I just had a great time getting these people everything I could and enjoying the show right along with you and everybody else.
Well, you know, I think you talked about it over the PA today about, you know, just how much respect you have for all those people that would travel the series, you know, bring their crew, bring their family, you know, and it really is a commitment. You know, people don't understand the kind of sacrifice it takes to be competitive in these series.
Well, it's because you magazine guys, you know, you make it look so easy when you report it, you know.
Right. They just do it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we love these folks. It's great to see the turnout. You know, there's a lot here. The early pioneers, the Nitrous Pete's and the Lee Rudders, and you know the people from Cars Illustrated way back then. You picked it up in Super Ford and 5.0. Muscle Mustangs was born out of Cars Illustrated.
Yes.
And an entire industry around this little car that Ford made pretty much the same from 1987 to 1993, and we've all benefited from it.
Oh yeah, and I recently wrote a column about this, but you know, it might be hard for you to believe now, but running a Ford used to be really an anomaly. It used to be a difficult thing. There was not a lot of aftermarket support, and this whole movement and NMRA starting and everything really created its own part of the aftermarket industry.
Yeah, without question, and I've thought about it in the larger context. It also set up all these companies when the LS was launched.
Yes.
And you saw a lot of the Mustang guys at least start offering parts for the LS world, and it really gave that whole platform a boost. That sounds impossible now when you look at how widespread LS engines are, but I give a lot of credit to the companies that came along with the 5.0 Mustang and just grew this entire industry, which is a $50 billion aftermarket industry. We should probably remind folks, this is not just a little hobby that people go do. This is a major American pastime that puts a lot of money on the table for folks.
For sure. And since you brought up a dirty word at the NMRA talking about the LS, we should mention that Jamie has gone on to be a major part of the industry. You worked at General Motors for quite a while. You helped launch some programs there. So I'd like you to talk just a little bit about that.
Yeah, it sounds odd. I'm a true blue Ford guy. Owned several 5.0 Mustangs. You know, they were project cars in 5.0 Mustang magazine. But one of the people that raced NMRA was the marketing manager for GM Performance Parts, right? And she offered me a job. I took it. Ran with it for 15 years, and we did the Copo Camaro, multiple Camaros, the Stingray, all the LS, all the LSX crate engines. It was great to be a part of it. And then I went on from GM. I worked for SEMA for 3 years as the president at PRI, which was a great, very intense job through COVID. And now I work for a private equity group that buys companies that make great performance parts. And, you know, one of the products someone's got to do it, see, but someone has to repop the 5-liter Mustang notchback body.
I completely agree.
So that we can keep building these cars.
If you're out there, you know, we need a replacement body, you know, because all these guys back in the day beat them all up. So if you find a mint one, it's going to cost you a mint.
Yeah, and I've told this to maybe 2 people in the world, but I'm actively talking to manufacturers to try to make it happen because they're all gone, man. They've all been raced at NMRA. They're out at street racing. But, these Fox body cars have just carried this industry for decades now.
Yes. Well, I would love to see that. So when you make that happen, I might be the first one to order one. But I want to backtrack a little bit and just talk about some of the stories that you did over the years. I know in particular I assigned you a story which I think is pertinent to now. We did, I don't know, this is probably 15 years ago at this point. We did a history of the 5.0 racing movement that you put together, which was an incredible story that documented the early years through the beginning of the NMRA. So if you can find an old copy of 5.0 Mustang, it's definitely worth reading. But, talk about maybe a couple of your favorites that you worked on over the years.
I love that story, labor of love. I remember spending, several weeks putting it together. And you want it to be accurate because people are going to reference that thing for years.
Right.
For me, it was the project cars were very personal to me. Right? We did Project Mondo Stalker in the pages of 5.0 Mustang. It was a play on Evan Smith's Stalker where he went stock eliminator racing. You and I are watching all these street racers that may not care that much about stock eliminator racing. So, we had Jim Summers, the late, great, incredible Pro 5.0 driver who
and
built
Tybo
my
instructor.
car. And Tybo instructor. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. We built Project Mondo Stalker with basically a stock engine and a big Mondo Vortec. That car ultimately won 870s and was the fastest magazine project car for many, many years. You let me run wild with that thing. The other car that I loved dearly was the 03 Cobra that I bought brand new.
Oh, yeah.
It had a pony prep package. That car basically ran 1180s with nothing done to it. Like, those cars kept this whole thing going.
Yeah.
But a lot of my favorites were the coverage of these racers, the records, the year-long runs, the technology that would come out from the supercharger manufacturers when turbochargers came in and finally took over. And then all the characters. We could sit here for an hour, and I'm going to forget more than I remember, but the people have made this organization amazing, and they're still out here running today. I think they all went to True Street, though. There was only like 500 of those today.
Yeah.
But great class, great class.
Yeah. Well, and wrapping this up, since you've been around this since the beginning, and we talked a little bit about this, did you ever expect 25 years later this thing would still be cooking like it is right now?
No, I think that's the profound question. An incredible effort by Steve Wolcott.
Absolutely.
Incredible staying power with his team. When I was in the tower this afternoon, the first thing I did was I thanked the NMRA staff, past and present, that made this possible.
Yeah.
There's so many volunteers. There's so many people that have given a little bit extra to make this happen. And it's because we just love the action. The cars are great. And it, for me, it makes me feel like a kid when I look back 25 years ago and what I was doing when this all started.
Yes.
And we're starting to sound like old guys, but young at heart, my
That's
friend,
right.
young at heart.
Definitely young at heart. Well, thank you very much for your time, Jamie.
Thank you.
It was an honor working with you, and I appreciate you giving us a little bit of time today.
Thank you, pal.